After my dad lost his job and we had to move to this small town, I found myself desperate for any work I could get. From day one, I noticed something off about our plant manager. He'd strut around in his fancy tie and white shirt, looking down his nose at us workers. It was clear he thought he was better than everyone else. The job itself wasn't too bad. We'd clean, process, sort, and package meat for local stores. The work was repetitive, but my coworkers made it bearable. We'd joke around and chat while we worked, making the hours fly by. Our break room became a sanctuary, a place to relax and refuel during our short breaks and lunch. That's when the trouble started. It began with little things disappearing from our lunches. At first, I thought I was going crazy. I could have sworn I packed cookies, but they weren't there at lunch. Then others started noticing too. One day, a coworker asked if anyone else's dessert had gone missing. I chimed in, saying I thought I was losing it because my candy bar had vanished. Another coworker joined in, mentioning their muffin was gone too. We tried to keep an eye on the break room, but it was impossible with our workstations. The thief was clever, striking when we were all busy on the production line. This went on for weeks. We'd accuse each other jokingly, but deep down, we knew it had to be someone else. The tension was building and people were getting angry. I expressed my frustration to my coworkers, pointing out how ridiculous it was that someone was stealing our food when we worked hard for our money. One coworker suggested it might be the new guy in shipping, but another disagreed, reasoning that it had to be someone who could slip in and out quickly since the new guy was always on the other side of the plant. That's when it hit me. The only person who could come and go as they pleased was our smug plant manager. But how could we catch him? The idea came from an unlikely place, our work itself. We used edible ink to stamp meat grades and syringes for marinades. A plan started forming in my mind. I gathered a few trusted coworkers and shared my idea. We'd set a trap using Hostess ding-dongs, those chocolate cupcakes with cream filling. Perfect for our sneaky plan. We carefully injected the cupcakes with thick blue ink, making sure the packages looked untampered. Then we placed them in our lunchboxes and waited. The anticipation was killing us. Every time someone walked near the break room, we'd tense up, but nothing happened. Until a few hours later. Suddenly, the entire production line erupted in laughter. Our plant manager came bursting out of the break room, his face and shirt covered in bright blue ink. He looked like a Smurf had exploded on him. The plant manager shouted in confusion, demanding to know who was responsible for this. He ran to his office, leaving a trail of blue splatters behind him. We tried to keep straight faces, but inside, we were howling with laughter. For days afterward, he didn't show his face. His secretary told us he was working from home, but we all knew the truth. When he finally returned, you could still see a faint blue tinge around his mouth. A coworker whispered to me, pointing out how the manager was trying to act like nothing had happened. I grinned back, commenting that I bet he'd think twice before stealing again. The best part? Our lunches were never touched again. It was a small victory, but it felt good to stand up to someone who thought they could take advantage of us. Sometimes when faced with injustice, a little creativity and teamwork can go a long way. And while I don't condone pranks in the workplace, I have to admit, seeing that entitled manager get his comeuppance was pretty satisfying. I've been serving in the German Navy for the past 3 years. It's been a challenging but rewarding experience. I joined right after finishing school, driven by a desire to serve my country and see the world. The Navy seemed like the perfect fit. I've always loved the sea, and the idea of being part of a team protecting our nation's interests appealed to me. My job involves long periods at sea, which can be tough. We're often away from family and friends for weeks at a time, dealing with rough weather and the constant motion of the ship. But there's also a sense of camaraderie that develops among the crew, and the feeling of accomplishment when we complete a mission is hard to beat. Anyway, last December I just finished a 2-week deployment. It was cold, and I was exhausted but happy to be heading home for some much-needed rest. I decided to take the train, still wearing my dark blue Navy uniform and jacket. As a soldier, we get to ride for free if we're in uniform, so it seemed like a no-brainer. I arrived at the station with about an hour to kill before my train. After 2 weeks at sea, I was desperate for a proper bathroom break. Little did I know what I was walking into. As I approached the restrooms, a woman, let's call her Karen, stormed up to me. She immediately demanded that I fix the flooded bathroom. Confused, I asked her to repeat herself. She insisted that I fix it, her tone becoming more aggressive. I tried to explain that she had mistaken me for someone else, as I didn't work there. Karen, however, was having none of it. She pointed at my clothes, claiming they were work clothes, and threatened to report me if I didn't fix the bathroom. I was baffled. Sure, my uniform was blue like many plumbers' work clothes, but it clearly said German Navy on the jacket. I attempted to clarify the situation, explaining that I was a soldier, not a plumber, and directed her attention to the text on my jacket. Instead of understanding, Karen flew into a rage. She accused me of being lazy, insisting that her taxes paid for my salary and that I should do my job. I acknowledged that her taxes did contribute to military funding, but reiterated that she was mistaken about my role. Hoping to finally clear things up, I pulled out my military ID and showed it to her, emphasizing once again that I was a soldier. Karen responded with a string of curses that would make a sailor blush, and I would know. At this point, a station employee noticed the commotion and came over to investigate. Karen immediately complained about the flooded bathroom and accused me of refusing to do my job. She even grabbed my jacket as she spoke. I politely asked her not to touch me again, reiterating that I was a soldier for the German Navy, not a plumber. The employee confirmed that my uniform was indeed from the Navy. Suddenly, Karen's demeanor changed dramatically. She threw herself to the ground and started screaming, falsely accusing me of slapping her in the face. Her screams attracted the attention of nearby police officers. When they asked what happened, Karen repeated her false accusation. The employee quickly denied this, stating that I hadn't slapped her. Karen then accused the employee of lying to cover for a coworker, which the employee denied. I explained the situation to the officers, detailing how Karen had grabbed my jacket and then started screaming. While Karen continued arguing with one officer, I showed my ID to the other. The officer then addressed Karen, confirming that I was indeed a soldier, not a plumber. He also mentioned that they had video evidence proving I hadn't slapped her and suggested they have a closer talk in the office. Karen's face turned pale as she realized her lie had been caught on camera. The officers escorted her away, likely to face consequences for her false accusations. One of the officers apologized for the trouble and wished me a safe trip, which I gratefully acknowledged. After Karen was taken away, the employee and I shared a laugh over the absurdity of the situation. He was kind enough to get me a coffee, and we chatted until it was time for me to board my train. Despite the hassle, I was grateful for the station employee and the police officers who handled the situation professionally. When I landed a job in the city, I was determined to bring a piece of that natural beauty with me. That's how I ended up in this quaint little neighborhood, complete with its own homeowners association, HOA. At first, everything seemed perfect. The house was charming, and the garden plot in front was just begging to be filled with color. I couldn't wait to get my hands dirty and create my own little oasis. I spent weeks researching plants that would thrive in the area and provide year-round interest. That's when I discovered witch hazel and sedum. These beauties would keep my garden vibrant even as the seasons changed, especially during autumn when everything else started to look bare. Little did I know that my passion for gardening would lead to a battle with the neighborhood busybody. It started with a knock on my door one crisp autumn morning. I opened it to find a woman with a pinched expression, clipboard in hand. The woman introduced herself as the president of the HOA and commented on my unusual garden choices. I enthusiastically pointed out the witch hazel and sedum, mentioning how they brightened up the place as the weather turned cooler. However, the woman wasn't impressed. She informed me that these plants weren't on their approved list and that I'd need to remove them and replace them with something more appropriate. I was stunned. Remove my carefully chosen plants? I politely explained that I had specifically selected them for their beauty and hardiness, but she wasn't having it. She simply said rules were rules and warned me that I'd be receiving an official notice soon. True to her word, the letters started coming. At first, I tried to reason with them. I sent emails explaining the benefits of diverse plant life and how my garden was actually improving the neighborhood's appearance. But it fell on deaf ears. The situation escalated quickly. After the second letter, they started threatening fines. How could they fine me for making my property look better? I expressed my disbelief to the HOA president, saying it was ridiculous that they could fine me for having beautiful plants. She asserted that they could indeed do so, claiming it was in the HOA agreement I had signed. But I hadn't signed anything. My house predated the HOA, a fact I pointedly reminded her of. She dismissed this, insisting that I was part of the community now and had to follow their rules. By the fourth complaint, I was at my wit's end. That's when I remembered my old college buddy who had become a lawyer. I gave him a call, hoping he could shed some light on the situation. I reached out to my lawyer friend, explaining that I had a bit of a legal problem and asked if he could take a look. He agreed, and I explained the situation. A few days later, he called me back with some surprising news. My lawyer friend informed me, much to my amazement, that not only did the HOA have no authority over my plantings, but they actually owed me money. It turned out that because my house predated the HOA, I was grandfathered in and exempt from their rules and fees. They had been illegally charging me for years. Armed with this information, we set up a court hearing. You should have seen the HOA president's face when the judge ruled in our favor. Not only did I get to keep my beloved plants, but the HOA had to repay all the fees they had wrongfully collected from me over the years. After the ruling, I couldn't resist making a comment to the HOA president. I expressed hope that this would teach her to appreciate diversity, both in people and in plants. In response, she just huffed and stormed out of the courtroom. The aftermath was even better than I could have imagined. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood. Other residents in older homes started looking into their own situations. Suddenly, the neighborhood was bursting with color as people planted all sorts of exotic flowers, trees, and bushes. And all because one woman couldn't appreciate the beauty of witch hazel and sedum in autumn. After graduating college with a degree in communications, I struggled to find work in my field. Bills were piling up, and I was getting desperate. That's when I saw the ad for this job. It wasn't that nice, but it paid decently and offered benefits, so I swallowed my pride and applied. To my surprise, I actually enjoyed it. My team was great. 5 of us, all dressed in black uniforms with the company logo. We even had matching rain jackets for bad weather. The job could be challenging, but it was satisfying to help people understand their utility options. On this particular day, the weather was absolutely miserable. The rain was coming down in sheets, and the wind was howling. It was so bad that our bosses decided to pull us off the streets, something that had only happened once before in my 4 years with the company. We got the call to hunker down nearby with the company van and wait for further instructions. As we huddled in the van, soaked to the bone and stomachs growling, one of my coworkers suggested we check out an amazing sandwich shop nearby while we waited. The rest of us quickly agreed. We were wet, cold, and hungry. A hot sandwich sounded perfect. Plus, we were still on the clock, so why not? We made our way to the small shop, which was part convenience store, part sandwich place. It was cozy inside, a welcome respite from the storm. There was no counter to order at, just an employee walking around taking orders. I could see it would take a while for all 5 of us to order, so I decided to browse the store while I waited. By the time I was ready to order, my coworkers had already placed theirs and were sitting down. I gave my order and waited patiently. That's when she appeared, the Karen. She marched up to me and started rattling off a sandwich order without so much as a hello. I tried to interrupt her, explaining that I didn't work there. She responded sarcastically, implying that I was working but just not at the shop. She rolled her eyes and started her order again. I held up my hand to stop her and asked if the logo on my soaked jacket looked like the store's name. She just stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Just then, my order was called. I grabbed my sandwich and walked past her with a smile, joining my identically dressed co-workers at their table. But Karen wasn't done. She stomped off and found an actual employee, dragging the poor guy back to where I was sitting. She complained about me to the employee, saying I had refused to take her order and was incredibly rude. The employee tried to explain that I didn't work there and was just a customer. Karen insisted that I was wearing a uniform. The employee acknowledged this but clarified it wasn't their uniform and offered to take her order. Karen demanded to speak to the manager. At this point, my co-workers and I had finished our sandwiches and were getting ready to leave. As we stood up, all 5 of us in our matching uniforms, Karen's eyes widened in realization. One of my co-workers whispered to me, asking if we should say something. I replied that we should just go, thinking she had suffered enough. Karen was still arguing with the employee, who looked like he was at his wit's end. I almost felt bad for her. Just as we were about to step out into the rain, the shop owner emerged from the back. He asked what the problem was. Karen accused us of pretending to work there and refusing to serve her. The owner looked at us, then back at Karen, clearly confused. He explained to Karen that we clearly didn't work there as we were wearing utility company uniforms. Karen stammered, unable to form a response. The owner then warned her that she'd have to leave if she couldn't calm down and place her order properly. Karen's face turned red. Without another word, she turned on her heel and stormed out of the shop, right into the pouring rain. As we climbed back into our van, still chuckling about the whole incident, my phone buzzed. It was a message from our boss. We were being sent home for the day due to the weather. One of my coworkers jokingly asked if this was the best rainy day ever. I agreed, saying we should remember to thank Karen if we ever saw her again. We all laughed as we drove off, leaving behind one very wet, very hungry, and hopefully slightly humbled Karen.